Hello there. I think it's time for a February wrap up. So let's get into it. This was a very interesting month for reading. I read one of the best books I will probably read all year, and I also DNF'd one of the worst books I have ever read. And it's also critically acclaimed, which makes it even more strange that I DNF'd it at 35% because it was awful. I guess we'll get to that during this. I don't know when I'll talk about it, maybe at the end, but we'll get to it when we get to it. Let's talk about what I read this month. Just like last month, I'm just going to post them up right here as we talk about them because I'm lazy and I don't want to dig all the books out. I own all of them except for the one that sucked because you got to have physical copies to sniff. We talk about this every month. If you're not sniffing books, are you even living? Oh, and I'm going to talk about these in chronological order, so I guess I will save the turd for the end because it was the last thing I finished before the month was over. The Art of Fiction, Notes on Craft for Young Writers by John Gardner. Jimmy Nuts has talked about this before in one of his live streams, and I just thought, well, I'll give it a chance because he mentioned some writing advice he got from it in the Discord, and it worked. It was awesome. It helped a lot with some of my writing, so I thought, well, I'll give this book a chance. The book was good, but it should have been called Beating a Dead Horse, A Guide to Writing, because for about 60 pages of this very short book, he says the same thing in different ways. And it's like, all right, man, I got it. I got it in the first 20 pages. Like, you don't have to keep justifying your writing process or thought process on the craft to me. Like, I get it. It's good. You know what you're doing. But then he also is like, if you're a dummy, don't even try to write. It's not worth anyone's time. And I'm like, what? And it's like, well, I mean, honestly, if you're a dummy, you're probably not even going to try to write. I think when someone who wants to write a book, like if they bought a book about writing, they're already so far ahead of someone who's like just a normal person. The people who buy writing books, I feel like are already predisposed to write okay. But one of the first things in this book says, if you don't have good grammar, don't even try. And I'm like, really? I think I'm being a little hyperbolic here, but a couple of times too, he's like, well, you should go to college. And if you don't go to college, your writing won't be as good as someone who did. And I'm like, all right, man, if you say so. But there's really good advice in it. There's a collection of exercises in the last third of the book after he's done beating that horse to death. They're awesome. I highly recommend the book for anyone who just wants to get to that section of the book. I think it's worth it because you can pick up a copy on eBay for like $5. And so just that little section in the back is good. Also, it's a super short read. It's 240 pages and a bunch of that is exercises. So go ahead and get it if you're interested in writing. It'll probably be mentioned on another video of mine when I make like 8 more books to read to think like a writer. The next one I finished was Winter's Dreams by Glen Cook. This is part of my journey of reading everything Glen Cook has ever written. I'm at 26 out of 52, so the pace is going really good. I'm averaging about 3 a month, so we should definitely be able to knock it out. I might try to knock it out sooner so I can get on to another project. But Winter's Dreams is a Subterranean Press collection of short stories. I think about half of them are also in the Best of Glen Cook, which is one of the reasons why I just plowed through it so quickly. The stories are great. It's Glen Cook. It doesn't have any of the like bad Black Company stories that came out later on, so that helped. I gave it like it's good, but not like amazing review because it's short stories. Some of them are amazing and then other ones are just like mediocre. So it kind of balances out to just being good. If you're a big fan of Glen Cook, it's worth picking up. But honestly, some of the best stories that are in it are also in the Best of Glen Cook. So if you have to choose between the two, probably get the Best of Glen Cook. But the problem with the Best of Glen Cook is it has some of the awful Black Company short stories that came out after he finished the series. So I take that back. Get Winter's Dreams because it's a Subterranean Press book and the cover is beautiful and it's just really nice to have on the shelf. So last month I read The Fall of Giants by Ken Follett, which is the first book in the Century trilogy. It's his multi-generational epic story about the 20th century. The first book was absolutely amazing. It was everything I wanted. It was in my wheelhouse. The part of history that I enjoy, which is like the late 1800s, early 1900s, up to the end of World War I, which is exactly what that book was, and it was magnificent. Well, I read Winter of the World, which takes place from the early 1930s to just after World War II, and holy crap, it was somehow better, and I don't understand. Now, I know a lot about World War II because I guess when I was a teenager, I decided to do what every man does when they turn 40 and specialize in some part of history for no reason. So I've always known a lot about World War II. I've read a lot of World War II memoirs. I've read a lot of World War II history books. Man, this book is so good. It's just as historically accurate as the first one, but man, it gets into the brutality of World War II in ways that I have never seen covered in another work of fiction. The raw humanity of it all, and then the oppression and just how bad and how graphic things became in it. The way he writes characters, each book is just better than the last. I can't believe it. And I loved so much getting to see this new generation of these families and how they play off the people I followed in the first book. And I fell in love with those people, and I'm seeing them getting older and changing, and some of them compromising and some of them dying. And it really sucks. It's such an emotional ride. And to have these new characters and be just as emotionally involved with them, if not more, I just couldn't believe that it was even possible. And that leads me to Edge of Eternity, which is the third book, and I will be reading it during the month of March because, man, I can't wait. I don't know if I'm going to do it this weekend, but I will be finishing it this month, and I'm super excited, and I can't wait. And when I finish it, I think I'm going to do a review of the whole series because, man, I think this one's going to be really good too because it covers another time that I really think about a lot, which is the early 1960s. It's the start of the Vietnam War, the civil rights movement, and then it stretches into the 80s, and it's just the Cold War and all that. And I just, man, can't wait. Super excited. The next one I read was Primitive Baseball by Harvey Fromer, and it's just a history of early baseball. It's the first like 25 years of professional baseball or something. So it's like the late 1860s, early 1870s, all the way up to the turn of the century. And a lot of it was a repeat of another book that Harvey Fromer wrote called Oldtime Baseball. And it covers America's pastime in the Gilded Age, which is the same kind of time span as Primitive Baseball. So I think a lot of what was in Primitive Baseball was used later on for Old-Time Baseball. The book's super short, and it's a really good primer on that era of baseball. Like, I've read a lot of books about early baseball, and so everything in it is like spot on. There's all these little interesting tidbits that I picked up from a bunch of other books, and the fact that it's all in this little book that's like 115 pages or something, and a good chunk of that is stats. So it's a great read for anyone that's interested in early baseball. I can highly recommend it to baseball enjoyers. Shards of Honor by Lois McMaster Bujold. Man, that book is good. The book is real good. It's a space opera. There's so much going on. It's so cool. It's very fast paced. I loved every character in it. One of the things I really liked about it was sometimes when you're reading space operas, like, people don't make adult decisions. They make decisions that are needed to move the plot along. And even when they make adult decisions in some of these books, like, you never see their thought process, or it's kind of hard to tie each decision together. Now, these people are adults. It's great that I get to read something where these people act like you or I would in a situation like this if we knew what the hell we were doing. It's really refreshing. I really liked it a lot. I'm going to keep reading it. I'm going to be making a video about all the book series I've started but not finished and put them on like a tier ranking and stuff. And like, I really want to get more into the Vorkosigan saga. It's just, there's a lot. I would really be tempted to binge it, but it would just take me the next like 3 months. So I don't think I'll get to binge it, which is unfortunate, but it's real good. I highly recommend it. So moving on to another book in my Glen Cook journey, Deadly Quicksilver Lies, which is book 7 in the Garrett P.I. series, which is his fantasy noir detective setting. It's really good. This book wasn't one of the best, but I really wouldn't say it was the worst because none of them are bad, but it was just like the most okay so far. And I think one of the problems with that, and my opinion on it changed as I read the book, is the weight of the world is starting to kind of push you down as you're reading. Garrett has all these different characters he's interacted with and all these things that have happened through the series, and they just get mentioned in this. And sometimes you're like, I don't remember that at all. Fortunately, Wikipedia actually has a great summary of every book. So what I did was I just went through and skimmed the first 6 books on the Wikipedia entry. So I kind of got my bearings again. I couldn't remember when things happened and a couple of characters. I was like, well, what did they do again? And fortunately, in those synopsis, it kind of refreshed everything in my brain. But yeah, the book is good. it's got all the corny like dialogue you would expect in like a noir style story like Raymond Chandler or Dashiell Hammett or something. One of the things it does, and Glenn Cook is such a jerk for doing this to you. You've got this corny dialogue and you've got like him like fighting these thugs in the street and doing all this stuff. And then he gets home and he's got like these two guys that he's taken in because he really didn't have a choice and he felt bad for them. He's like just being the grumpy like detective or whatever. And then the next moment you have him sitting at a table with these two guys and he finds out that they're war veterans like he was. And there's like the fantasy equivalent of a Vietnam War that's been going on for multiple generations at this point. And they just share in the trauma they all experienced in the war. And it's like this really emotional couple pages. And then you're just like, why would you do this to me? I'm enjoying this book. And then you just like punch me in the stomach and make me want to cry. And it's just so real and so raw. And I just am shocked by it every time Glenn Cook does it to me. The battery on the camera died, so I'm trying to remember where I was. I was talking about Deadly Quicksilver Lies. Sorry if there's a choppy edit. The book is great. Highly recommend it. The Garrett P.I. series is really good. The first one really starts off as a banger, so definitely recommend the series. Thanks to StoryTube, I decided to invest in another thriller series or mystery series, and that's the Jack Reacher series by Lee Child. So I read The Killing Floor this month, and the book was good. I have some complaints about it, but it's mostly nitpicking because I am a very pedantic person when it comes to certain things. And so Lee Child was doing some like Hollywood BS with guns and stuff. And I'm like, that's not how this works. But I've heard that it gets better over time. And the book was still really good, despite all of my issues with it. I still had a lot of fun with it. I liked the mystery. There was like a turn late in the book where I'm like, really? Because a couple pages beforehand, I was like, this better not be the turn that happens soon. And then it did. And I'm like, really? But other than that, the book was great. I'm definitely going to keep reading the series. So I'm really glad that I took their advice and started the series. And let's move on. Hey, look, another Glenn Cook book. So With Mercy Toward None is book 5 in the Dread Empire series, and it's the second prequel book. The book is good. The two prequels are better written than the original trilogy, but not in a way that it makes the original trilogy inferior. But man, I know a lot of people out there think you have to read in publication order. Do not read these in publication order. Read the prequels first. The prequels have a lot of characters that are in the original trilogy. And if you read the prequels later, you just don't care about some of the stuff that's happening. The stakes aren't that high because you know who survives. You know what empires survive. I mean, it's military fiction. You know what armies win because those people are around later. And so it just really took the wind out of my sails as I was finishing up this book. So I highly recommend you read these two prequels first, then the original trilogy. Not to mention, in the original trilogy, in the first book, a lot of these characters, he never really goes into their background at all. So you're like, oh, cool. Like, I kind of latch onto this guy or whatever, or this person, but you're just not really invested. But if you read the prequels first, you're already in love with these characters. So as soon as you see them in the first book, you're like, oh, okay, this is awesome. I missed you. You're my favorite. Can't wait to see what you do. So read them in chronological order, not publication order. I'll go into that a lot when I do a review of the entire Dread Empire series. So I got this dog, and she's going to sit here with me while we talk about You Can Write a Mystery by Jillian Roberts. So this book is literally just 115 pages of how to write a mystery novel. And I've read a lot of books that are guides on writing. I've read other guides on how to write mysteries. This book is the best. It does such an amazing job of giving you step-by-step practical information. It gives you a dossier for fleshing out your characters so you can do their whole background with this thing. And then it just really, really helps you later on when you're writing your stories. It's awesome. She does such a good job of giving you practical advice. And like I said, the book is short. It's like 115 pages or something. So you get a ton of amazing advice in a very short amount of time. And it's easy to flip back through the book. Definitely check it out if you're interested in writing at all. And especially if you're interested in writing mysteries, like you got to buy it. I had to go grab this sleepy little boy because I'm talking about his book series, The Chaos Agent by Mark Greaney, which is the 13th book in the Gray Man series. The Gray Man, Court Gentry, right here. The book was great. I'm not going to really spoil anything because this is in like the description of the novel. It's about AI, and it's about everyone that's at the forefront of artificial intelligence just starts getting killed and no one knows why. And then, Court gets involved because reasons. It's really good. One of the things I will say is this is by far the most speculative he's written. It's definitely like near future-ish. I mean, everything that he mentions in the book, like I've seen, like there's like drones and stuff in this book. And I'm like, hey, I saw that at Boston Dynamics before DARPA bought it. And now no one knows what it can do and stuff like that. Everything in it is very practical. He's definitely stretching into some speculative stuff, but it's really good. It even kind of wraps up why it's not happening in our world, because everything he writes is very grounded in reality. And this one is too. It's really interesting. You get to go to new locations that you've never seen in his series. I highly recommend the book series. He definitely became a better writer over time, but the first book, The Gray Man, just starts out as a banger, and it's really great to see Court's journey through the series. And then some of the characters that show up in here are some of my favorite in the series, and I love seeing them on the page again. I missed them so much, and it was just so fun. Highly recommend it. Man, now that I'm thinking about it, this month has been like really good for reading. Almost everything I read was pretty good to like, holy crap, this is amazing. So this was a very exciting month. Also, I'm on pace for doubling the average books I read in a year. I don't know why. I've just been really, really motivated to read lately. It's been fantastic, and I really hope I keep this going. But let's talk about something demotivating, like a bad book that you thought was going to be good. And that book is Babel 17 by Samuel R. Delany. I went into this book with very high hopes. This tied for the Nebula Award in 1966 with Flowers for Algernon, which is one of the greatest science fiction books I have ever read. Now, I want to know what moronic authors in 1966 thought that this came even close to Flowers for Algernon. Like, the book is bad. Like, I don't understand where the critical acclaim is. Like, not only is the book built on a philosophical concept that has been debunked, it's just not good. So I DNF'd it at 35%. Of that, half of what I read was just filler. It was just crap. There were like people who had cosmetically altered themselves to look like weird animals and stuff, wrestling, and just weird stuff. And like a lot of the philosophical stuff in there was like, why? Like, the whole premise is language alters your thought patterns and changes the way you think about the world and the way you perceive things. And like, yeah, that's fine, but the execution of it is not very good. This probably could have been a really good novella, but it feels like it was stretched into a novel. And I don't know what people see in it. Like, this has happened to me before. I'm going to bring this up and people are going to be annoyed with me, but like Catch-22 is not a good book. It's not even funny. And the whole premise of it is just bad. Like Major is hilarious. That is funny. But so much of that book is just built on the stupidest premise. And I hated it. And so this is another one of those books that I'm like, why? I straight up did not have a good time with Babel 17. I still can't believe that this was tied with Flowers for Algernon. That is just like, I don't know what they were thinking. That's all I read. For plans for next month, like I said, I'm going to do Edge of Eternity. Let me see what else I got going on. I got to open up my phone, see what I'm doing. Oh, yes, I am on The Conquering Sword of Conan. And when I finish that, I will have read every Conan story written by Robert E. Howard, which means I get to move on to the pastiches that I'm interested in. None of the L. Sprague de Camp. I don't have time for that crap. But I found out Poul Anderson wrote a Conan pastiche. That's amazing. But before I read the Poul Anderson Conan pastiche, I found that Carl Edward Wagner wrote a Conan novel. Carl Edward Wagner is the best. Holy crap. His Kane series is so good. Those short stories are masterfully written. Before that, I'd only read one of his like horror stories, which is 220 Swift, and it was really good. But man, he can write. It's just so sad that we lost him as early as we did. I would have loved to see what he did over 20 more years of writing. In the Kane series, like, Kane is not a good guy. Kane is not a bad guy. Like, he's very, very in the gray. And in a story I just finished, Kane was wandering through the desert, and he gets to the edge of the desert and he sees a campfire and there's a giant there. And he talks to the giant because he's starving. And the giant's like, yeah, come on, I'll share food with you, blah, blah, blah. And they're hanging out and talking. And they get into like the differences between the old races, like giants and stuff like that, and humans, and how humans are this upstart and how humans are soft and they don't have it in them to survive without destroying the environment around them and creating civilization. And the giant basically warns him. He's like, you think you're superior and you think your ability to destroy the environment around you to make yourself safe will work forever, but eventually it will come back to bite you. And he's talking about environmentalism. It's so cool. This story was published in like 1978 or something. They're having this conversation because Cain is not an idiot. Cain is the oldest living person. He's very well educated, very erudite. And the same thing goes for giants. You always see giants portrayed as like these brutes and these giant morons and stuff, but they have this like really, really cool, really smart conversation in this sword and sorcery story. It's really good. But yeah, enough gushing about Carl Edward Wagner. I will make a video about him sooner than later. Yeah, I plan on also reading Geddy Lee's autobiography, My Effin' Life. I'm going to listen to it because he narrates it, and that's so cool. And I've heard really, really good things about it. I'm a very big Rush fan. My dad was like a Rush super fan, and I've listened to them since before I was born. And so I had to read it. I'm also going to read more Glen Cook. Chances are I'm going to try to finish the Dread Empire series during the month of March. It might bleed a little over. We'll see. But yeah, I'm excited to do that. It's only 3 more books. The Dread Empire books are short, so we're looking at maybe 900 pages worth of story to read all 3 books. So I might be able to get it done in the month of March. I just got a lot on my plate. I'm going to try to get as many books done in March as I did in February, which was like 10 and a half or a third or something, wherever I DNF'd Babel 17 at. It was a really good month. I had a lot of fun in February, and I can't wait to see what happens in March. I want to say thank you for watching. Leave a comment if you've read any of these or interested in them. I'm always open to more book suggestions. And with that, I'll see you next time.